but I wanted to get started, and first of all, thank all of you for joining us today. We've had so much interest in this presentation, and I do want you to all know that we are recording it, so if you need to reference it back, please feel free to do that. And if you have questions, we will have a question and answer period at the end, and we are also monitoring the chat. So if you do have questions, you can put it in the chat, or at the end, we'll have question and answer period. If you haven't done so already, if you could mute yourself, I would really appreciate it, so we don't have any background noise as we get started and move through the program. So again, thank you all for your interest in today, and I hope I can answer your questions. And if not, you can always get back to me via email or another way, and we will make sure you get your questions answered. So I want to tell you a little bit about my background. I am the Executive Director for the Pennsylvania Association of Conservation Districts. We are the umbrella organization for all conservation districts across the Commonwealth. We help folks with their programs. We provide some funding from outside sources like our partners that we can utilize. We have some mini grant programs that are available, and I'm going to go through all of that as we go through the presentation. So I want you to give you a little bit of my background. Many of you know me, but some of you do not know me. I have been an advocate for agricultural and environmental resource concerns for the last 40 years. I am working as the executive director right now for PACD, and I've been the director for 9 years. Prior to that, I was at the Department of Agriculture, and prior to that, I spent some time here at PACD, but in a different capacity as your legislative director. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to have a poll, and we're going to ask you to let us know whether or not you have had district meetings with your legislators. So up on the screen right now, how often does your district meet with legislators in a year? And you can go ahead and fill that out and submit it, and then we will have more of an idea of what the audience is like. So please go ahead and do that, and we'll go from there. We'll give you a few minutes to answer the poll question. And here are your answers. So if you look at that, excuse me, you'll see that, I'm so sorry. You'll see that most don't really know, or they maybe once or twice a year. Okay, so now that we have the answers to some of your questions, we'll go on to the next slide. Why build a relationship with lawmakers? And isn't that really the question? Isn't that why we are having this webinar today, so that we can talk a little bit about effective relationships with legislators, and they're essential for legislative success. So conservation districts are definitely the key local agencies delivering state programs. And you'll see on the slide, we just listed a few: technical assistance to landowners, ENS plan approvals, nutrient management plan approvals, and development. And legislators really need to understand the role that districts play in environmental law and regulations. There's so many new legislators that have been elected over the last 5 years or so. And many of them, quite honestly, are unfamiliar with conservation districts and all the things that you do on a regular basis. And I think in many cases, our conservation districts are so interested in their projects, their programs, but it becomes the best secret at the local level. And not only at the local level, but at the state and federal level as well. So what we need to do is we need to change that. We need to make sure that legislators understand all the things that you do, not only in their county, but across the Commonwealth. Now, engaging legislators effectively. Remember, legislators receive hundreds of emails every single day, and they get contacted by their constituents every single day. So what we need to do is make sure that conservation district activities are in the forefront of their mindset as we move through the year. We can do that in a variety of ways. And you see on the slide that we can have individual meetings. We can have information sessions. We can talk about projects and go on tours. We can either stay connected by correspondence or by phone calls, or discuss specific legislation and address local concerns as needed. There are also a possibility that we talk about and attend county meetings, so that even though the meeting is not for us necessarily, but it is also for the county commissioners, to talk to the county commissioners, to talk with legislators who are at other folks' meetings, and just have a face to the name multiple times per year. You don't have to say anything at these meetings. You can just have individual conversations and discussions either before, after, or during the meeting. So let's go back to engaging legislators effectively. Okay, there you go. There are some ways to go ahead and do that, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what some of the districts have already done. Some districts have bus tours, and they go to different sites where projects are either already implemented or in the process of being implemented. And so bus tours are pretty popular when you're talking to conservation districts about opportunities to meet with legislators. One very interesting tour that took place was a boat tour. One of the districts rented a pontoon boat and invited legislators to join them to go to a site that you can't reach from the road or local area. And it was a great opportunity. The boat went right up to the site and was able to talk specifically about the site, even though most people have not been able to get there by road. Another opportunity was one of the districts had a beef operation tour. Many of the legislators are unfamiliar with farming practices, and it was an opportunity to show those legislators exactly what happens at that beef operation. Stormwater projects is another area where you might be able to have a tour. Or if you don't want to have a tour, you can always have some kind of a legislative breakfast or legislative luncheon and give the legislators an opportunity to hear what all of you do on a regular basis. Some districts have these events, and they allow each of the staff people to give a very brief discussion on exactly what they do and the projects that they are working on. I have to make sure you understand, however, that these legislative events need to be brief, especially the ones where you are in a room talking to legislators and having some kind of a meal. What you're finding is you need to let the legislators know on the 30,000-foot level exactly what this project is. If you get too down in the weeds, they will lose interest. So I wanted to make sure that you understood that brevity might be your best option. Okay, next slide, please. What is the legislative toolbox? It's important that you understand that all of this information is on our PACD website, which is www.pacd.org. And the legislative toolbox includes tips on meeting with legislators, hosting the events, sample invitation, press releases, and social media templates, an overview of the Pennsylvania budget process, and guidance on coalition building and outreach. And I'll go over each of these sections individually so that you have a clear understanding of what is in the legislative toolbox. Okay, legislative basics. Ideas for building effective relationships with legislators means a number of things. Number one, send legislators your newsletters and annual reports. Invite legislators to district events and offer them a short time slot on the agenda. And also, as you're doing this, include your county commissioners in addition to not only your state legislators, but your congressional legislators as well. So you have to give them a job. If you just ask them to go to the event, chances are you won't see them. But if you give them an opportunity to speak, like for instance, just as an example, invite them to go to your Envirothon, but also allow them to present the winners with some certificate or something from either the House, the Senate, or one of the other entities. If you don't give them a time slot, probably you're not going to see them. So in addition to that, it's important that, excuse me, we include local community events in that opportunity. What you want to do in that case is let the folks know that those community events you're going to attend, and also perhaps ask for a 2 or 3 minute presentation on exactly what conservation districts are and do. Okay. Hosting a legislative event. It's important that you follow a guide as you are planning your event, and things would be different depending on what the event is. So, excuse me. First of all, I think you need to understand that legislators are in your home district on Thursday and Friday. So if you're planning an event, please don't plan it when they're going to be in Harrisburg, which is typically Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. But Thursday and Friday are opportunities for you to do whatever it is that you want to do, whether it be a meeting, a tour, etc. While you're doing that, you need to develop an invitation list. And the invitation list should include all those legislators, but also include other maybe like-minded organizations in your county. That is up to you, and we'll talk about that in a little while. Putting together the agenda is probably the most important part of the planning process, and you need to do that very early in the game. So if you're thinking about putting something together, think about it months ahead of time, not just weeks ahead of time. As you prepare your event, you need to prepare some handouts, press releases, social media announcements, and things that concern the event, things that you're going to be discussing. The last bullet is very, very important. Legislators love pictures with them and their constituents to put in their newsletters and other social media, whatever they use. So take loads of pictures and make sure you send those pictures to the legislator so that they can use it in their outreach. The pictures that you send will help them as they have political and public exposure. So it's important to include all of that. Okay, time for poll number 2. It's coming up on the screen even as we speak. There you go. I'll give you a minute or two to fill it out. It's one question, pretty easy. Okay, Going once, going twice. Here we go. So it looks as if it's about half and half. Some districts held legislative events in the past year, and the other half has not. Okay, so a sample invitation and a press release. If you look on the slide, you'll see that we did put together a template for you to use as you were talking about your legislative events. It doesn't have to be an extensive invitation. It can be only several lines, sentences, but you have to make sure that it gets out months in advance. Legislator schedules often get really tied up. And so the sooner you get this information out to them and get it on their schedule, the better. I would do it actually several months in advance. When you're doing that, you need to make sure that you have the scheduling person's contact so that you send this not only directly to the legislators, but that their scheduling person as well. I would actually send it to not only the scheduling person in your county, but also on the statewide level. And if you don't know who that is, I would just give the office a call and find out who they should CC. So that's a template that you can use or modify as you see fit. Okay, building a coalition. Sometimes it's worth it to have a networking opportunity, to have a tour or some kind of a legislative event with some of the partners that you deal with on the local level. If you work in tandem with the groups, it's a great way to broaden your base of contacts, and it's also an opportunity to pull more people in to your event. The coalition should be structured to establish a very, very shared vision and make sure all the key players understand exactly what you hope to accomplish in your event. I would give them each a 2 or 3 minute opportunity to talk collectively to their sponsors, but make sure that they understand that it's your event and that they only have a couple of minutes to provide information. You don't want it to be taken over by some of your coalition members and networking. Okay, media moments. We talked a little bit about the opportunity for pictures for the legislators. You also might want to get your local press involved to amplify your message. Typically, we can use a press release or social media outlets to relay the information to the media and the public. And as you know, PACD provides actually a number of templates that you can use for press releases, for monthly social media announcements, and that social media announcement on a monthly basis you can use at your discretion. It is totally up to you whether you want to do that. I know some districts are very, very good at social media. Others need a little bit of help, and we'd be more than happy to help you as you proceed with your event. The press release or media outlet should announce exactly what you're going to be talking about and something new as an issue of importance to the reader and or the listener. And again, you can send all of this information also to the legislators, because we found that legislators actually just use our templates in their monthly announcements, or sometimes legislators actually have weekly announcements. So if I were you, I would consider, as you put together your media list, to computerize it so you have a database to work on in future releases. You might want to get the name of the reporter who works on agricultural and environmental issues, if it's a bigger news outlet. And I would also get that person's media email address, telephone number, postal address if possible, and utilize as much as you can with not only press releases, but social media sources. So when you're distributing the information to your daily papers that have a very large circulation, you might want to make sure that you keep those reporters in your database so that you have them for the future. And again, use PACD's toolbox as you're working on media announcements and the monthly releases that we send out, but also, we send out a weekly release that's called Front Page, and you can utilize all of that information as well as you move forward. Excuse me, I apologize. I'm battling a bit of a cold, but I'm much better, so it's all good. So I'm going to change courses just a little bit and talk about the Pennsylvania budget process, which is different than what you probably see when the governor gives his presentation to the General Assembly, which, by the way, happened yesterday. So how is the Pennsylvania budget developed? And what you need to know is that they develop their budget almost a whole year ahead of time. It's a very complex system, and to pass the budget by June 30th or July 1st or around there, you have to look at the total picture, not just what happens after the governor presents his or her proposed budget, and then the House and the Senate have hearings specifically on the budget where they have each of the secretaries from the governor's office give a presentation, both in the House and in the Senate. So around August of every year, the agencies are asked to submit their proposed budget requests to the governor's budget office. So that happens almost a year ahead of time. They use revenue projections to determine the budget base, but generally the agencies are told to keep the requests within a small or no increase percentage. And that's important for you to understand, because as we move forward and as PACD asks for some budget information to be developed, we need to talk to those agency folks and let them know that we are asking for an increase or what we're going to be asking for that particular year. But it happens almost a year before the budget actually gets enacted by and signed by the governor. Okay. Now we're going to go to how a bill actually becomes a law. Lawmakers are constantly looking at opportunities to introduce legislation. It takes a very long time to get a bill from the beginning all the way to the end and to the governor's office. Sometimes it's more than a couple of years, and the idea has to go through both the House and the Senate and the governor's office. The other thing you have to understand is at the end of a 2-year cycle in a new legislative session, all bills that have not become law go away, and we start all over again in another 2-year cycle, which means that the bill numbers change, which means that some legislation will not get reintroduced and others will get introduced again the following year. The other thing you have to understand is that in many, many cases, there are thousands of bills that are introduced, but only a couple hundred actually become law. And it might not happen that first year. It might happen in subsequent legislative sessions. The other thing that is important to understand is that in some cases, the legislator really doesn't think that their bill will become law. They introduce it because they've had a constituent inquiry, or they introduce it because it's something that they've noticed in their county. But in some cases, it's never intended to become a law. It's just intended to be introduced. And that's why there are thousands of bills that are introduced, but only a couple or maybe a couple hundred get actually to the governor's office. Okay, poll number 3. Here we go.
Brenda, while folks are taking that poll, we did have a comment
Okay.
from Dave and Franklin in response to inviting legislators to events. He said,
Mhm.
don't be surprised if they cancel after indicating they will come based on our experience.
And that is something to consider. So one of the things that you can do is after you send the initial invitation, as I said, should be a couple months in advance, follow up with them about a week before the event. In many cases, what happens is they'll send their legislative assistant, which is fine. There's not a problem with that. The information will get back to the legislator. Plus, all the pictures and press releases and social media will get to the legislators as well. So Dave, you have a very valid point, but at the same time, I wouldn't consider that a reason not to invite them. I'll give you another second to fill out the poll. Here we go. So it looks like there are folks who still needed additional information, and we're happy to help you with that as you move forward with your legislative events. And if you have press releases or are working with the media, we can certainly help with that. And coalition building, of course, we can help with that as well. Okay, so in conclusion, the legislative and toolbox, which is on our website, again, www.pacd.org, there's a tab specifically on the legislative toolbox, and it will help you to look at all of those things again. Much of the information that I've shared today is also in the toolbox. So if you're interested, you can look on the toolbox, but if you still have questions, of course, contact me in the PACD office and we'll help you. So the resources that are available in the toolbox is really to help strengthen your relationships with legislators, not only on the state, local, and federal level, but to enhance the environmental initiatives that you all are working on at the local level. If you still have questions, that the full ebook, which is the toolbox, is detailed and will help you as you move forward. Okay. So this is the public speaking and presentation skills training that I promised I would talk about with all of you. On Wednesday, March 12th from 10 to 3 at the Ramada Inn in State College, there is a workshop inspiring action through public speaking. It's really a great opportunity for all of you to participate in, and it's audience driven. It will incorporate messages that resonate with your specific audience. It will build storytelling into your presentation. It will help you develop delivery skills, overcome speaking anxiety, which I know many of us have, and build self-confidence as you move forward with your presentations. So again, this is going to take place on March the 12th from 10 to 3 in State College. And if you look on the screen, you'll see the registration link that you can use as you move forward and as you are interested in participating in this. And finally, again, my name is Brenda Shambaugh. There on the screen is my email address and my phone number. And please, if you have any questions at all, contact us. So now I think what we're going to do is open it up for questions and answers. If you have a question, if you could put it in the chat or raise your hand and we will try to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you again for joining us. We had, oh my goodness, over 75 people who have listened today. I hope I've answered your questions. If you have not, please get back to me and we'll make sure that the information gets to you. Shannon, is there anything in the chat?
No, it's pretty quiet.
Nobody has any questions?
Brenda, can I verbalize one?
Of course.
You can count on me to have a question. Can you clarify for everyone the funding sources in terms of the majority of funding that conservation districts receive, state versus federal, and how those funding sources are appropriated on the state level?
Okay, so I'm not exactly sure of your question, but you need to make sure as you plan these events that is an educational event. You cannot use government grants to pay for whatever it is you're planning on doing. It's an informational session, and even the tours can be an informational session, but you do have to be careful not to use state funding. Your state funding, I think, is the second part of your question, and that is through the Department of Agriculture's CDFAP line, and also DEP's CDFAP line. And there's also opportunities for Growing Greener grants or for private entities providing funding for specific projects. Just make sure that it's educational in nature and not an advocacy role. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Sure.
Okay, Brenda, here's a comment from Matt. Does anyone have an example of a learning experience they had when dealing with a legislator? What we learned the hard way, what not to do, sort of thing. And then Adam asks, would you recommend one-on-one meetings?
Okay, let me answer the first one or the second one first. One-on-one meetings. One-on-one meetings can work great, absolutely, without a doubt. And probably I should have addressed that a little bit more, but you can go to the legislator's office. You can have some kind of a Zoom meeting. I would recommend that not only the staff people, but your board people and also participate in that meeting, whether it be one-on-one or actually any event that you plan. Make sure that your board members are with you as you present to the or tours, but also one-on-one meetings work really, really well. Sometimes legislators go to the district office, and other times the district folks would go to specifically to their local office. And the first part of that, Shannon?
It was just a question to generate discussion about if any districts had a learning experience when they were dealing with the legislator, sort of like Dave said about inviting the legislator, they're not showing up, you should have a plan B. What you learned the hard way and what not to do that you may want to share with other districts. I did see John Dreisel had his hand up, possibly briefly.
No, he has his hand up. John, are you answering that question?
No, but I had something to share. I mean, I guess it could be tied into that.
Okay, go ahead.
When it comes to developing relationships with the legislators, what I can say is it's never too early to start. Many times when we have events, if there's elections coming up and there's candidates running, we also invite, the candidates that are coming because they may end up being the elected official, and starting those relationships early. And the other thing is, when you're building the relationships, just paying attention to what's going on in your community, and just showing up at different events that other organizations or agencies are doing in the community where the legislators will be there. For instance, we have a rec authority here that does a lot of rails to trails, and every time they complete a section of trail, they do a ribbon cutting. And we know the legislators are going to be there. We know they're going to be there to speak. So I will go to those events just to be there to show support for the projects. But my face is there. You see the legislators, they know who you are. They know you're engaged in the community, not just in the district world. So they don't have to be formal meetings, and they don't have to be anything that you're even putting together, but um, just getting in front of them, to where they see you, and then they start knowing you just by you being at a lot of events.
You're right, John. And one of the things that someone recently told me is that they had a trash collection event, and they invited their legislators, and at least one, if not more, of those legislators spent the whole day with them picking up trash. So obviously, it's something that they're interested in their local community. And also, John, you brought up the fact that they're candidates every other year, at least the House are candidates every other year. And so they're much more interested in community events because they want to get their face and name known as well. Other comments. So I'd like to hear, if possible, from anyone who has had an event where there's been success or where there's been some changes that you've had to make for future events. Anybody have some examples of that?
Brenda, I guess one other thing I'd add when it comes to that success, and when you said like either give them an opportunity to speak or give them something to do, we found if there was something there that they could do, maybe some type of hands-on activity, really generates interest in, in them being there. When we did our legislative tour a couple years ago, and it was on some of our lake projects and shoreline protection we did, we also work with the Fish and Boat Commission for habitat. We actually had the Fish and Boat Commission build some habitat structures and bring the boats, and we let the elected officials go out on the boat and actually push some of the porcupine cribs into the lake, to put some habitat in. And it was a great photo opportunity for them. It was great exposure, and that the press was able to get some good pictures of that. So, just think of what adding something maybe to your events, that would be a little hands-on for them.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And you had a number of legislators who participated in that boat tour, correct?
Yes.
I want to go back a little bit to the state funds that go into the CDFAP on both DEP and PDA. PACD has an ad hoc budget committee. We've already met one time, and we are actually meeting later on this afternoon. One of the things that we're going to be deciding is exactly what we're going to be asking for, which is probably a 6.5% increase in the CDFAP lines. And the justification for that is that our costs have gone up. And if you look at the CPI, you'll see that over the last couple of years, there has been about a 6.5% increase in costs. So we're going to be meeting, and we're going to be putting together some ideas and asking districts if they would be willing specifically to talk about that increase and specifically leadership in both the House and the Senate. So if you have any ideas or questions, you can please call me about that as well. As you know, for at least the managers, we put together a very short survey on not only our salary survey, but what perhaps we can do to enhance the our ask for 6.5%. We're going to be talking about that as well. Overwhelmingly, the districts found that the salary survey that we did a couple of years ago helped them. It didn't matter if you were independent or if you were county-based. In some cases, the independent districts were allowed to increase their funding for staff and also add some additional staff. In the county districts, it really depended. Some counties did look at what those increases were and put that into consideration as they were increasing their salaries. Other counties, excuse me, were not able to utilize the salary survey because of their classifications of employees. But at least it gave those county commissioners the opportunity to look at what was available to them. Matt wanted to say that, yes, this will be recorded and you will be able to have access to it.
Brenda, this is Adam Stern at Lancaster. I was wondering if you could just give us the quick version of how I know PACD through its meetings and membership will eventually provide comment or statements of support or otherwise on specific legislation. And so I was wondering if you could just run us through real quick kind of what that process looks like or how that comes about.
For PACD, we do
Yeah.
have a policy process for that. It takes about 6 months. A motion can be discussed and passed at the local level and sent on to us. It can also be from the PACD Executive Board, if that's appropriate. But also we have a 6 committee, standing committees that look at all of those issues, and they could pass a motion. And then that motion, all of those motions go to our region meetings, which are held on the spring and in the fall. So they start this year in March and go through about mid-March to mid-April. After each of the regions have an opportunity to look at that motion, they either pass it or they reject it, and then it goes to the next region meeting. So we have 6 region meetings, and so we have 6 discussions. And we just had this happen actually in January. If the motion is amended for any reason, we make sure the districts or the regions that have already met get that information so they can look at the changes or edits that some of the regions have made. After all of that happens, we send everything out to all of the districts. We have 2 statewide meetings, one in the winter and one called the Joint Annual Conference with the SCC. During that time, we have an executive council meeting. If you are in good standing and have paid your dues, you get 1 vote. So if all 66 pay their dues, which is all of the time, then we have a discussion at the statewide level, and then it is discussed and voted on. 1 vote for every district. After that happens, if the policy is passed, then it becomes our PACD policy. Does that answer your question, Adam?
Yes, that was perfect. That was great.
Okay. The other thing, very, very, very important. Shannon reminded me that Conservation District is coming up April 20th through April 26th. It's also during Earth Day. And we will be sending out all kinds of templates that you can use as you move forward to plan your Conservation District events. We will have templates, we will have invitations, all of that will be available to you. We also will have a 1-sheet fact sheet on our 3 or 4 main topics of discussion that we think that you might want to consider talking about as you have your Conservation District Week activities. Last year, we had numerous districts who got involved with Conservation District Week one way or the other. And since in some cases your envirothons take place during that week, then you can also include that in your discussions as you move forward. Shannon, I see things are coming through the chat.
It's me. I put the dates for Conservation District Week in there, which is April 20th to 26th. Someone had asked about. I put in the link for the PACD policy handbook in case people want to go check that out. And then Matt just posted the link to register for the upcoming public speaking workshop.
Perfect. Thank you both.
Hi, Brenda. This is Jackie Kerstetter.
Hi, Jackie.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good, thank you. Thank you for the presentation today. And my question is, how are you made aware of which pieces of legislation that you are interested in and want to comment on and, take back to the districts?
So it all has to be covered in our policy book. If there is something that we feel is very important for folks to understand, and we think that there's a piece of legislation that is moving, we can notify the districts and let them know. But we have to make sure that it is a policy decision. If something comes up that we were not anticipating in our policy, we can always get input from the districts and of course the PACD executive board. And so then they can send out something as they see necessary. So it's impossible to know, Jackie, exactly when legislators are going to ask for their legislation to be decided or at least discussed at a legislative general assembly committee meeting. There are numerous committees that we look at, for instance, the Ag Committee or the Environmental Committee. And if we find out, and we have a very good relationship with those folks, not only the chairman of the committee, but also the staff people with the committee. And sometimes we'll get a heads up. In fact, most times we'll get a heads up. In many, many cases, the staff people will send an email to me saying, okay, here are the bills that we're going to be looking at over the next day in many cases. So you don't have a whole lot of time to consider it. The good news, however, is that it's a long process, as I mentioned before. So it goes to a House or Senate committee. It's voted on or not voted on. Then in most cases, it goes to the Appropriations Committee, and then ultimately the House and Senate floor. And then it goes to the other chamber. So there's multiple opportunities for us to look at those pieces of legislation. To be quite honest, we focused quite a bit on funding for conservation districts and the CDFAP. And that's an important part of the process. So in some cases, we send perhaps suggested questions that legislators might ask, which would promote conservation district activities. Jackie, does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thanks, Brenda.
Of course. Other questions? Okay, we are getting near to our 1 hour break time, but again, thank you so very much for joining us today. Really appreciate the opportunity to share this information with you. And I hope you have a great afternoon. Thank you, everyone.